Thank you all so much for joining us for the Effectively Incorporating Committee and Advisor Feedback into Your Writing Project workshop. Joining us today is Dr. Candace Burton, Director of Doctoral Education and an Associate Professor in the School of Nursing. So today we're going to talk about things like recognizing the value of feedback and how to use it for improving and refining your writing, and gaining insight into how to effectively communicate with your committee and advisor regarding writing feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Burton to get us started.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this workshop. In addition to being a professor of nursing, I am also the faculty liaison of the addictions research development area here at UNLV. And I also happen to have a degree in English, so I do know a few things about writing. So I'm going to share what I know with you today, and I hope you'll feel free to ask questions, put things in the chat. I'll try to keep up with that if I can. Otherwise, we'll hopefully have a little bit of time to talk at the end. So let's get started here. So the first thing to do when you get back a draft with feedback, or you get comments or something, is not panic. Because it's easy to panic, right? You look at this thing that you've put so much work into, and it's covered in corrections, and there's like 15 pages worth of text that have been edited, and there's all these comments in the margin, and you can't even figure out what's going on. Don't panic, okay? It can be overwhelming. But the first thing to remember is that feedback comes from people. Even if they scare you because they're your PI or your committee or your advisor or whoever, nobody is perfect, and neither are any of our suggestions. So just remember that we're all human, and we're all just trying to do the best we can in terms of improving whatever this thing is that we're all working on. Next, think about what is the goal here. Begin with the end in mind. We say that all the time in nursing. Like, how do I get from point A to point B in this procedure or this skill or whatever? So if I'm trying to start an IV and I want to end up with a nice IV taped and running in this person's arm, I'm not going to start without the supplies I need. I'm not going to start without the flush to make sure it's working, okay? So think about, what are you trying to do here? What did you write? Why did you write it? What have you learned since? Because we all know that sometimes feedback takes a minute, and by the time you get it back, you're going, oh, I missed this whole set of stuff I should have put in here. Where are you going with this paper? So what is the purpose here? Is this something that might be for publication? Is this just a term paper? Is this a comps paper? What is this? And what are you trying to achieve with it? Okay, so think back to where you started and then think about where you are, because that's going to help you understand that you do know something about this, even if you either feel like you don't or these comments make you feel like you don't. Another good thing to do to help you, if you have the bandwidth, is sign up as a reviewer for journals in your area, because then you get to give the feedback. And it helps to see what other people write, how they write it, and then that will help you think about, how do I improve my writing? And you might start to realize that as you're going through some manuscripts for journals, you're like, oh, now I know what Dr. Burton meant when she told me to blah, 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 right? Because you'll see it and you'll think, oh, that's what the problem is, okay? So these are just ways to start off with a good mindset, okay? Just think about the fact that nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to give you any, lashings for not incorporating their feedback exactly the way they wanted. You need to figure out where you're going, and you need to be sure that you know a little bit about what you're writing, where it's going, what's the purpose, and what do you want to do with it. Step 2, don't panic. I'm going to say don't panic a lot, okay? Because the first thing that happens when you get that email back is, right? And you feel like, oh no, especially if you're having difficulty with someone, like if someone's not understanding where you're coming from, or you're not communicating well, right? So don't panic and step back, okay? Because the thing you never, ever want to do is never, ever respond to feedback in haste. Never, ever. Never. Not ever, okay? When I get reviews back on a journal paper, I look at them and then I put them away. Because if you try to attack them the first time you read the feedback, you may be angry, you may be frustrated, you may be confused, you may be exhausted, and you're not in a good place to start, okay? So unless you get some like glowing, crazy review and it's like, change this one sentence and we accept your paper, step back. put the thing in a drawer, whatever you need to do. Just get away from your computer, get away from it, and take a few breaths, okay? And when I say step away from the computer, I mean step away from this thing for a day at minimum, okay? Until you have kind of, you know how when you bite your tongue, you keep going like this to see if it's healed yet? See if it's healed yet, okay? So feel like you can take a breath. Maybe you can read these. You've remembered that you are not your writing, you are not your reviews, you are not this paper, right? This is just something you're working on, okay? And the feedback is there to help you. So get away from it for a while, get some space, get a breath. Then come back to the computer, okay? Because at some point you're gonna have to do this, all right? So the first thing you wanna do is make a plan, okay? So break this work into the most manageable pieces you can. If that means you go 1 page a day, if you have time for that, fantastic. If it means that you work on it for 30 minutes, leave, and then do whatever else you need to do in your day. That's fine too. So I'm going to give you some examples of ways you can make a plan here in a minute. I'm going to show you some tables and templates and things that you can use, but break it up. Don't try to do it all in one fell swoop, okay? Because that's exhausting and it's going to be frustrating. So generally, when you need to revise and rewrite something, you cannot do it all in one shot. Okay, I know a lot of times my grad students will tell me that they try to block out whole days for writing, and I'm like, are you nuts? Please don't do that. You can't do that, okay? Nobody really can concentrate effectively on anything for more than 2 hours straight, okay? That's a neurological sort of maxim, right? Nobody can really focus that long, all right? So break this into pieces. Maybe today it's 30 minutes. Maybe tomorrow it's an hour. Maybe the day after that, it's just 10 minutes because that's all you can stand. Okay. So give yourself some limits. Don't let this one thing become all that you're doing. Do not let this one thing eat your whole life. Okay. And don't obsess about it either. If you find that you're obsessing about it when you're not supposed to be thinking about it or you're supposed to be working on something else, go work on it for 5 minutes, just enough to assuage the guilt, and then get back to whatever it was that you were doing, because other things are important too. You know, you don't just have one paper that you work on for your entire grad school career. Do not try to reread the whole paper and try to revise from that. You will drive yourself bananas because you will start to see things that the reviewers didn't even catch, right? If they didn't complain about it, you don't care, okay? If later you want to change it because you're going to publish it or something else, that's fine. But do not change anything that you haven't been told to change, because sometimes we go through multiple rounds of feedback, particularly if this is part of your thesis or your dissertation, right? You're going to send it back and forth with your committee or your advisor or whoever a few times. So don't make more changes than you have to during any phase of that, okay? Track your changes in at least 2 ways, all right? Obviously, the easiest way to do it is if you're working in Word or in Google Docs, just turn on the review thing and track your changes so that you can see. Okay, so in Google Docs, I think you have to change it to suggesting so that you can see the changes. Okay, in Word, you just turn on track changes. All right, do that, and then I'm going to show you a second way in a minute. So this is a way to keep yourself on track with your writing. This is a writing agenda template. Okay, so notice here that I have a whole bunch of lines for different things, because if you try to write one thing at a time, you will never finish. All right, because you're always going to have, if you're still doing coursework, you're going to have 3 or 4 classes, and maybe 2 or 3 of them have papers. If you're in, if you're in a fellowship or postdoc or something, you might be working on multiple projects with multiple people. So keep track, and you will be surprised at how much time you're spending. A few years ago, I participated in a faculty development boot camp that was like 12 weeks long, and we met every week to work on stuff. And one of the things that they had us do was to spend 1 week tracking our time and writing down everything we did during work hours, even if or doing work, whether it was inside business hours or not. Right. So keeping track of how much time really showed me how much time I was spending on things like email. And I was like, I need to not spend so much time on email. How much time I was actually writing and how much time I was doing other stuff. Okay. So this is one way to track your stuff. Okay, I was saying there's a second way to track your changes. This is not really for changes. This is for your progress and your plan, so that if you've got multiple things going on at once, you can kind of keep track of all of them. Okay. Oh, this is also great if you happen to be working with a group. So see here, I have first author and other authors. If you are writing as part of a team, that's helpful because then you know who's responsible for what. Okay, step 3A. Now we're actually going to tackle dealing with this feedback and incorporate them. First thing we got to do is read it again, slowly. Because the first time you read it, you may not have read it carefully because you might be ticked off. Okay. Or you might just not have understood what was going on there. And you needed to let lizard brain do some work on it. And then now you can come back. So you got to read the comments again, all of them, slowly. Or don't. Okay. You need to figure out what works best for you with the time that you have and your schedule and your preferences. Okay. I like to read the whole thing again so that I get sort of a 10,000-foot view of the changes I need to make. Some people, I have a student who does this, reads the first one, fixes it, reads the second one, fixes it. It works for her. That's cool. But you need to figure out what is going to be the most effective way, what is the most sort of comfortable way for you to approach this. Okay. And this is also a good time to consider if the process that you have with your advisor, your committee, or whoever you're working with, if it's working, okay, or what you might change to make it better. So for example, if you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with one committee member, maybe that's not working terribly well, because if that one committee member is, for example, your GAC member and not in your department and doesn't really necessarily understand your field terribly well, you may need to go back to your advisor and say, I need to figure out a better way of handling this. Or you may need to say, you know what, I'm going to put those ideas to the side and I'm going to work on this stuff, and then I'll come back and see if I can incorporate any of that. Because I can promise you that no reviewer, no person is going to remember everything they wrote for you to do. Okay. If you make a good faith effort and clean up the paper and show them what you've done, I promise that will work. Step 3B. Now this is optional. Okay. Get a friend or your dog, somebody. Your dog may be more literate than mine. He's usually no help at all. But get another person to help you look. If you're really struggling with something, having a second set of eyes on it, particularly if they are educated eyes, someone who maybe isn't in your field, but might be a fellow academic, or who is in your field, but maybe is more senior or more junior to you, and see if they can read it. Okay. If you're reading it and you're like, I swear this must be written in like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics because I can't make sense out of it, that's when you might need another person, because sometimes we read things differently depending on who we are, right? So somebody else might see something a little different in the comment and be able to help you figure out how to attack it. All right. Establish some accountability for yourself. Okay. You're going to have to do this. If you're going to finish this project, this paper, this publication, whatever it is, at some point you have to get done. So you need to establish accountability for yourself. And whether that's getting a friend to text you every day and say, how's that paper coming? Which sounds crazy, but also works. Or telling your advisor, I'm going to have it back to you on this date for feedback, or, putting it on your calendar. I will be done at this point. Okay. Sometimes there are things you can do around the revision so you don't get bogged down in it. If you're incorporating feedback and you just feel exhausted, your brain won't work anymore, whatever, if there are other things you can do. Now, this is especially true if you are writing for publication, because there's always like the cover letter and the title page and the files you have to upload and figures and whatever. Okay. So if there's stuff you can do that is not necessarily the nitty gritty work of getting in there, tackling the feedback, do the other stuff and give yourself a break. Okay, because it makes your brain work a little differently, might give you a rest mentally, and gives you some space from what you're doing. Okay. If you are truly stuck, if you really just don't know what to do, come find your advisor or your faculty. It's our job to help you, right? This is I tell my students all the time, one of my jobs is to translate what other people are saying so that it is in student speak and makes sense so that you can figure out what to do. Okay. So this is all as you are taking this in and working on it. Okay. Now, when you have done all of this prep work and you're ready to actually tackle the review comments. And this is one of those around the paper things that you can do. This is a template that I use every single time I do a revision for a journal, because look at the top line right here. Look here. I have this lovely thing about thank you, you're wonderful, you're so smart, you helped us so much. Even if I hate this editor at the moment, it's already there. I don't have to feel fake writing it. It's already written, so I don't have to care. And I promise you, I send this with every revision I do, and they love it. It also sets a nice tone for when the person reviewing comes back to look at your paper. They're like, oh, look at that nice thank you. Isn't that kind? But the other thing that this does is it creates a map. Okay, this is that second way to track your changes that I was talking about, because you want to be super clear what you did, okay, and why. All right. And you want to make it really easy for the reader, your faculty, your committee, whoever it is, to find it in the paper. Because again, we are people and we are tired. Okay. So I do this so that when I send something back, I put the comments in the left-hand column, whatever the comment was from the reviewer, put it right in there, put my response in, and I'm going to show you an example of a completed one in a second so you can see kind of how to respond to something if you need to respond, okay? And then I show them where, so that they don't have to read the whole paper again, because remember I said that way lies madness? It is for reviewers too. I hate it when I get a revision back from somebody and I can't tell what they changed. If I just get a clean document back with no track changes, no comments, no highlights, no colored text to tell me where changes have been made, that's really frustrating. And it's almost like I have to do the whole thing again. And I may find things I didn't find the first time, which makes more work for the author. So just keep this in mind. Keep it really simple. I always tell my students, keep it super, super simple. Make it easy for people to look at your work, know where you are, know what you changed, and if they're satisfied with it. Here's an example of one that's written out. So this, I don't even remember what paper this is. This is a really old completed table, but you can see, so here I've put this comment. The purpose of the manuscript could be stated earlier for the reader. Research questions require greater specification. I very nicely say, we agree. We realize that, and I did take a little dig at the reviewer here. We realize that the revision process may have obscured initial description of our intent. Whose fault is that? Anyway, we have added this statement and specified the aims. And then over here, page 3, beginning line 1, page 3, beginning line 19. And I even put in this, I don't always do this. I don't always put the whole change in the table. But it's another way to keep it simple, get your reviewer. I mean, at this point, all this reviewer needs to do is look at the table. They don't even need to look at the paper again, because here are the changes I made, and this is what it says now. Okay, so we have all these things in here. The authors state they are testing whether the sample of women will evince depression or lower. SRH stands for self-rated health. However, they do not have a comparison group. We recognize that this is unclear. I've revised it. Okay, so we fixed that there. Here's another thing. The manuscript could be appreciably shortened. Now look what I did here. I didn't say to them, I've cut 6 pages out of this manuscript. I responded to the specific thing that they said here. For example, you don't need this sentence and these sentences, okay? Stuck them together. This is what we have now. All right, so you wanna make it simple. Make it as easy as you can for this person, whoever they are, to go back and say, okay, you've made these changes. I can see if I'm happy with those changes. And I'm not, more than likely, gonna go back through the whole paper and see if I need any other changes. Step 4A. This is important when you are doing this. Okay, so when you are working on this table, you're working on your response, you're working on how you're gonna reply to these comments, take the word but out of your brain. Okay, because you're gonna read the reviews, you're gonna read the comments, you're like, but, no. Because the reviewer has to be right, even if they're a reviewer too. If you're not familiar with the whole mythology of reviewer two, there is a whole Facebook group called Reviewer Two Must Die, because for some reason, Reviewer Two's comments are always the hardest to read and hardest to deal with. I don't know why. It's a thing. Start paying attention. You will see the same thing. Okay, but they have to be right. Okay, because you're not going to get You're not going to be able to move forward unless you do what they're asking you to do, even if they are dead wrong, stupid, imbecilic, or otherwise inept. Okay, which you may call all of them while you are staring at your computer screen. That's fine, just don't record it. So you're going to have to deal with this one way or another. So just accept that you can't argue with these comments necessarily. Now, maybe you can if it's your committee or your advisor and you really think there's a problem. Maybe you can, but generally, realize that any revision that you do, any incorporation of feedback is getting you to a stronger paper one way or another. Okay, even if it's adding, a whole bunch of text that you think doesn't even need to be there, for somebody who's not in your field, maybe it does. So they have to be right. So no buts. Be specific. Be very, very specific. Again, go back to this. See how specific this is. Exactly where, exactly what. Thank everybody. Again, my little message to the reviewers and everybody. It's always nice to say thank you. It doesn't matter if you really are grateful or not. You just say thank you because somebody gave you some time. Even if they gave you a lot of headaches too, they gave you some time, and that's valuable. And then always close if you're emailing this back to somebody or, whatever, I look forward to hearing from you, right? Because you want them to tell you that your paper is good now. Okay. So these are just some practices that you can incorporate into your writing process to make it a little easier on you and on the people that you're writing with or writing for. So these are just some extra details that you can incorporate. Step 4B, during the revision process, you should always talk to yourself. Really. Because sometimes great ideas actually come out from what you'd like to say to the reviewer. So this right here, do I have to draw you a picture? This was actually me. I was working on a manuscript from my dissertation, and maybe the one that I just showed you that revision table from, actually. And I was reading these comments. I remember so clearly, I was sitting on my couch. I had printed the stinking thing out. I had the comments, and I was going through the paper trying to figure out what to do. And I was just cursing these reviewers up one side and down the other. And I muttered, do I need to draw you a picture? Oh, crap. If you feel like you need to draw a picture, you need to draw a picture. All right. If the comments are making it so clear that these people cannot understand what you are trying to tell them, maybe you need a diagram or a model or a figure, something. Okay. I have more than once thought, do I have to draw you a picture? And then drawn a picture that ends up in the paper. Okay. So smart art in PowerPoint is your friend for these. There are other things you can do, but that one is really easy to work with once you figure out how to navigate it. So if you feel like you need to draw them a picture because they're not getting it, draw them a picture. If you think to yourself, did you read this paper? Okay, maybe they didn't get what the paper was about. So maybe give them a clear purpose statement and then summarize it again later. So I always tell my students that the beginning and end of a paper are like a hourglass, right? Or, a martini glass, depending on where you're feeling. But the beginning of the paper needs to go from some broad general statement to the specific purpose statement of the writing, okay? And then, and this goes to, I can't remember whose axiom this is, but there's somebody who talks about teaching who says, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them, then tell them that you told them. Okay. So when you go beginning of paper to end of paper, you want almost the same set of stuff. Okay. Because you want to be clear. You want to remind them at the end of the paper where you started from and that you have now achieved your goal of getting from here to here. All right. Because if you don't tell them, they may think, well, this paper just ended. I don't know what happened here. Or, so we like as a culture, this is where my English degree comes in. We like narratives in our culture. We like stories. Okay. So stories have a shape, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, and then they lived happily ever after. Think of your paper similarly. There has to be a beginning. Then you tell them what happened, which is all of your lovely findings, results, and discussion. And then you give them their happily ever after, which is where you say, I achieved what I started out to do. Okay. If you're thinking to yourself, but that's a whole other paper, you may have to respond and say, that's not what I'm doing here. This is, such discussion is beyond the scope of this work. That's one of my favorite comments in a paper, because I'm just telling the reviewer, I'm sorry, I can't address that in these 14 pages or whatever it is here. So these are ways to handle some of the thoughts that may go through your head while you're reading. So, and keep track, right? Because if you're sitting there thinking, oh, this reviewer is not getting it. Okay, what aren't they getting? Are they not following your process? You need a picture. Are they not understanding what you're trying to do? You need a purpose statement. Are they telling you to do? I had a committee member for one of my former PhD students who has since graduated, by the way, in her comprehensive exam, recommend an entire other study in addition to what she was proposing for her dissertation. And I just said, no, I'm sorry, we're not doing that. That's out of scope. That's too much work. Okay. You could do that, but then you will never graduate. So that's where you can also get some guidance from people with more experience than you in the field, especially when if you need to set a boundary and say, nope, I can't do that. That's a whole other thing. However, do keep track of those ideas, because that may be a paper you want to write later. I was just talking with another student who's finishing up their dissertation, and I was like, okay, so you've got these things that you still didn't deal with. So that's the next paper, right? After you finish the dissertation, get those papers published, then get the next one published. Okay, that's where you can go. So keep track of those things, write those things down. All right. It's a good idea to keep a notebook anyway, especially in grad school. And I teach our theory development course in the School of Nursing for our PhD students. And one of the assignments in that class is that they have to start keeping a journal of their thoughts, their ideas, their thinking about the research that they intend to do. And I have had students tell me that they continued that right on through their entire PhD, because it's a way not to lose stuff. And I'm going to talk more about not losing stuff. Here are some general suggestions. Okay, so we've kind of talked through, I go all the way back here. We've talked through several steps, right? First, don't panic. Second, get away from it. Take a break. Never respond in haste. Step 3, come back to it. Think about how you're going to attack it. Break it into small pieces. Create a calendar. Step 3A, attack it. Okay, whatever works for you. Read the whole thing, read the first one, whatever. But figure out what works for you. Whatever makes you feel a little bit more in control, because we all know that when we get feedback and we're told to change things, we feel a little out of control, because that's our baby, right? That's our dissertation, our thesis, our paper, our chapter, whatever it is. And somebody just told you it's not perfect. Okay. Think about what works. Step 3B, get extra eyes. If you have no idea what's going on, find somebody who can help you. Do some other stuff. Distract yourself. Okay. If you're really stuck, go ask somebody to translate it for you. Track it, track it, track it. Okay. Make it easy for the person who gave you the feedback to see what you did with it. Don't argue. Thank everybody. Okay. Now we're here. We're actually doing a revision. So you just got to go step by step, and you got to pay attention to what's going on in your head as you go here. Sometimes you get a comment and you're like, wow, that's a really good idea. I can't believe I didn't do that. So you add it. I had that happen with a paper a couple of years ago where I was writing about the interactions between senior and junior faculty, and the reviewer said, you might want to add some oppressed group behavior theory in here. And I was like, holy cow, I really should. That would be great. Okay. So keep in mind that writing is a thing. Okay. It is a thing that you can learn. It is a thing that you can do. Practice makes perfect, though. The more you write and the more you read the kind of stuff you'd like to write, the better you get at writing. That's why I always suggest that people sign up to be reviewers. If you're at a place in your education or in your thesis writing that you can do that. Okay. Do not answer every invitation you get to review. Pick a journal or two that you really like. Sign up for the review panel. And if they ask you, okay, do not respond to the 50-11 requests you're going to get from what is that company that just got their impact factor taken away? MDPI. Don't answer the ones from them. It's not worth it. Okay. So the more you write, the more you read, the better you get. All right. So the more you write, and that means that you really do have to actually write. Sometimes we get so intimidated by a blank page or a whole slew of feedback that we freeze. But if I used to work with a woman who had a sign on her desk that said, "If you want to be a writer, write." I will get to these chat questions in just a moment. Let me park this over here so I don't miss anything. If it's okay with your faculty advisor committee, this is something I've been trying with my PhD students and DMP students. Use a Google folder that everybody can work on. That way, everybody puts their comments in. If you can use a Google Doc, everybody can edit it right there on the screen. I call this radical transparency in thesis writing, because what happens with that is that your advisor goes in and makes a bunch of comments. Then your committee members come back behind and they may go, "Oh, okay, this is not what I thought we were trying to do." And then that changes the way they look at it. Okay. And this can help you avoid that thing where you get conflicting comments, right? You get one committee member who says, "This paragraph is great. I love this." And the other committee member says, "This doesn't go here. I hate it. Take it out." Okay. And you're like, who do I listen to? All right. This is why a Google Doc can be super helpful, because people can see it. Okay. And they can even respond to each other. I have been known to respond to comments from other committee members if it's my student and say, "Actually, we're doing that in this other paper and you'll see that next week," or something like that. Okay. If you really disagree with something, yes. I got a review back on a paper one time that was so off the wall, it didn't even make sense. And so I emailed the editor and I said, "What do you want me to do with this?" And she knows me, fortunately. And she said, "Well, can you build a bridge? Can you address this somehow? And remember that you don't have to take everything they say in." And I was like, "Okay, so I'll take from this what I can and I'll address it a little bit. And I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to panic, right? Over this thing where this person obviously maybe really did not get the point." Okay. The other thing that happened recently was I was sitting in in the School of Nursing. We have these things called pre-dissertation meetings, which are really just committee meetings, but nursing, we like to name stuff. So I was in a committee meeting for a PhD student who's trying to graduate, and it became quite clear to me, and this is where it's good to have extra eyes. I was there just in my role as director. It became quite clear to me that the committee member that was having the most problems with the student's project actually didn't understand one of the main premises of the project. So I explained it, and the committee member went, "Oh, now I get it." So it may be that the person is confused too, because we thought we were going to have this big battle with this committee member who was going to hold up the student from graduating and make them collect more data and make them do all this extra stuff. Well, no, they just needed to understand what was going on and why that wasn't necessary. So you think you've explained something, but maybe not. Other ideas. Anytime you write something, every course that has a paper, you should be thinking about publication. Okay. I have published papers that I wrote in grad school. I have gone back, pulled them out of the files and gone, that was actually pretty cool. I think I'm going to turn that into something. Okay. So it needs to lead to a publication, a dissertation chapter that then leads to a publication, something. Okay. Don't throw anything away. All right. Don't think that you've written this term paper for this class and you're never going to touch it again. Don't panic. Again, I'm going to say that a lot. Don't panic. Okay. You get a bunch of feedback. Don't panic. Another thing you really need to do is keep yourself super, super organized, because you never know when you might want something back. Let me see. Okay. This is how I keep myself organized. So this is actually my Google Drive. I took a screenshot of it for you. And I figured out to do this when I was in grad school, because back in the ancient days, we kept all our PDFs. We saved them, right? If we used an article, we saved it, because it was hard to get them back again sometimes. So it's a little easier now. Thank you, Google Scholar Gods. But if some things you are going to want to save. Some articles you know you're going to want to refer to again, or maybe you're going on a trip, you know you're not going to have great internet access, so you want to save a bunch of articles. So what I started doing, because at first I was just putting everything in the folder I had created for the class I was taking. That's a bad idea, because if you refer to it once, you're probably going to refer to it again. So keep it there. Okay. So what I started doing was I would put the last name of the author, 2 dashes, and then some kind of abbreviated version of the title, because you can search by the last, that way you can search by the last name of the first author, and it's much easier to find stuff. So that's one way that I stay organized. And you can see I also have little folders in here. This is something I'm doing with my colleagues. This is the addictions IRDA that I mentioned back at the beginning. So keep yourself organized. If you're writing with a bunch of papers, keep them open on your desktop. Don't lose them. Okay. If you're using a bunch of the same references over and over again, save the sucker so you have it. And for the love of all that is good and decent, really, truly use a citation manager. If you are not using a citation manager, I beg you to start. Okay. I have been using EndNote for 20 years because I started when I went back to school. Whoops. And I want to show you EndNote because I want you to understand the power of a good citation manager. You don't have to use EndNote. There's like 20 different citation managers at this point. Zotero, Flywheel, Mendeley, somebody mentioned one the other day that I'd never even heard of. So, but you need to use it. And let me show you why, because this rocked one of my students' world. I got out of PowerPoint here for a minute. Okay. This is EndNote. Okay, let me share this. I need to share the whole desktop so you can see this stuff. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this now. So this is EndNote right here, this window. Okay, so here you can see that I have all of these sources saved into this database. This is what EndNote does. Okay, here is a book chapter that I wrote. It's already published, it's out, so I can fiddle around with it if I want to. Let me show you something. Let me show you the magic that is EndNote. So if you're familiar with APA 7, you can tell here that that's what we used for our citations. Okay, this is APA 7. Show you the reference list just for thoroughness. Okay, there it is. All right, so what if I've written this paper and I've done it in APA because maybe I wrote it for class and it was required that I do that. And it turns out the journal wants AMA. Okay, look here. This is the EndNote plugin for Word. I go here. I find AMA, which is coded as JAMA for some reason in EndNote. And look at the magic. Look what it did. Look here. And look here. Poof! That would take you all day to have reformatted that. I had a student recently tell me that she was still doing her citations by hand, and I was like, I'm going to strangle you. I also showed this to some of my graduate students, and they all went, I didn't know I could do that. That's the magic of a citation manager. It will save you a million years, honestly. It is so worth it. Pick a citation manager, find one you like, stick with it, because it can also do things for you like this. Do you see over here? These are groups. These are some, okay, this is the paper that I was just messing with. So this is a group. This is all the references that are in this chapter. Okay, so you can set them up. So this is a much better way to do it in your citation manager rather than having a bunch of folders on your desktop, because this way, all of the citations for that chapter are here in my group, but they are also still all in my reference library generally. Okay, so you can see I have 4,514 citations in my reference library, and that's because I've been using this thing for 20 years. And I have almost every citation for everything I've ever written in here. All right, and I believe the newest version of EndNote also works with Google Docs. I haven't updated mine yet, so I can't say that for certain, but that's the rumor I heard. Okay, there's also workarounds that can keep you sane in there. Okay, also to get these into your citation manager, you can usually get it right from wherever you got the article. You can get it from Google Scholar. It's a little clunky, so it's usually better to go to the journal's website and download it from there, and it'll go straight in. It goes right in. All this information is there. Poof, it's formatted. You don't have to think about it anymore. Okay. So please, 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 please use a citation manager. It will make your life better. All right, let's get back to these slides here. I just have a little bit more and then we can talk. Whoops. Oh, I hit play from start. Sorry, folks. I gotta click through it. Whee! Hope nobody's gonna have a seizure from that. Okay. And also, kill your darlings. So kill your darlings is from a book, I think, or something. I know that it was a phrase we used all the time when I was doing my English degree. Kill your darlings means that sometimes you have written something and it is so lovely and perfect and it's beautiful and you love this paragraph and it's fantastic and it doesn't fit in this paper. So when I'm writing, I have two documents open. I have my main document, whatever that may be, and then I have a blank document somewhere. I have multiple displays because, as my late husband once said, my wife uses every external display she can get her hands on. So I have the third screen. So maybe I put it over there, and anything that I think is gorgeously written and it might be important, but don't fit in this paper, I cut it out and I put it over there. Okay, because you don't want to lose it. All right. If you've worked that hard on it, don't throw it away. You need to kill your darling in this paper, but that darling might be reincarnated elsewhere. So keep that second file. I always have, whatever the main document is, and then I have another file that is main document cuts. That's just how I label it. It's kind of dorky, but that's what I do. So anytime I cut something out of the paper, put it over there. Because sometimes in the revision process, lo and behold, you need it back. And there it is. You didn't lose it because you didn't delete it and it didn't go off into the ether with your tears and your blood and you never see it again. Okay, so your darlings can be reincarnated. Okay, pull this one back over here. Okay, so please use a citation manager. Kill your darlings whenever necessary and as thoroughly as possible. And just keep in mind at all times, this is all of this. The writing, the revising, the dealing with feedback, the communicating with other people in your field is a skill and you got to practice it. Okay. So whatever you can do to establish your writing practice, do it. Make a deal with yourself. I'm going to write for 30 minutes and then I'm going to go take the dog for the walk. Okay. Incentives. This is a good one. I used to bet myself a pair of boots every time I needed to write a paper for something or get something published. I ran out of room in my closet, so that was good. I don't do that anymore. But maybe give yourself a deal. Maybe give yourself, I'm going to get this revision finished. I'm going to get it sent off, and then I'm going to go take a bubble bath. Or I'm going to go play on my Xbox for an hour, okay? Make yourself a deal. If you have to dangle the carrot and the stick over your own face, do it. And remember that a little is always better than none. So I mentioned that faculty development thing that I went through. Another thing that they have you do in that boot camp is you have to agree to write for 30 minutes, Monday through Friday. They don't care what you write. And they don't care if it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes all at once, as long as you write for 30 minutes every day. That probably helped me more than anything with my writing because it forced me to learn how to write in itty bitty amounts of time. I finished a paper during a faculty retreat. I fully admit to that, and people can say what they want about it, but it's true because I could look up, see what was going on, pay attention to that, write a sentence. And I could go back to paying attention and I could write a sentence in between presentations, in between exercises, whatever. I could just write a little bit. Okay. So a little is always better than none. Even if all you get is one sentence, that's a sentence you didn't have before. So forcing yourself to get into that habit, to make that part of your routine, something that you practice. This is great. Okay. Just keep going. And my advisor used to say to me, because the movie Finding Nemo was somewhat new when I was in grad school. Yes, I am that old. And she would say to me, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. I say that to my grad students, and one of my PhDs who just graduated gave me a mug that says, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. You can totally do this. You just have to find your path. So I have some questions in the chat here. Let me answer those. Stop my screen share so I can see your faces in case you actually want to speak up. Okay. For the table reply approach, do you have line numbers on? Is there a feature in MS Word? Yes, you can put line numbers. And if I look really quickly, maybe I can figure out where that is and tell you. I think it's under layout, maybe. And you can add line numbers, and it may also be under format in the main menu, not in the document menu. Sometimes I have to look around for those things. So yeah, and a lot of times when you submit for publication, when you build the proof, it will automatically insert line numbers for you, and then you have them. So you can use that too. Another great piece of advice, kill your darlings. Yes, please do. BTN next to things in my calendar is a reminder that it's better than none for a research and editing session. Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Are there any comments? Are there things that maybe I didn't touch on that you'd like to talk about, or specific questions that you have? We have 8 minutes, I think. How do you recommend handle a situation where you don't get a lot of feedback, but feel like you need it? That's a slippery slope. Because if the person hasn't given you a lot of feedback, that's on them, not you. Incorporate what you've got, and then maybe get somebody else to look at it. So if it's a committee member and you didn't get a lot of feedback, maybe take it to your advisor and see, do I need to do more with this? What's going on here? Or get somebody you know to read it. It's always helpful to get an uninformed person to read it. Somebody who understands academic and scientific writing, but maybe isn't necessarily in your field. Because my best friend texts me all the time, can you read this for me? And she'll text me like this, it's a page or something that she's written. And then I'm like, okay, what is this? So find somebody who can read it for you and say, do I really not need to do anything here? You can always ask for more feedback too. Would you share with us these templates? Yes, I'm assuming you want the agenda and the response table template. I am more than happy to send those to the Grad Academy folks, and they can get them out to you. I give that revision table template to everyone I know, because I swear to you, it has made my life so much better with revisions. Other questions, comments? Motivation and distraction have been the summer theme. I'm glad it was helpful, Esther and Yasmin. Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes and let me just say this, if you feel extremely unmotivated, if you are just feeling, there's probably a reason. It's called burnout. Go do something else. Okay? Because you can't force your brain to do something all the time. You need other things to do. I read the most ridiculous fantasy fiction on Kindle Unlimited. It rests my brain. And it means that I'm still reading, but I'm not reading hard. Like, I'm not reading to try and understand an analysis or craft a discussion. I'm just getting lost. Watch some Netflix if that works for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burton, for sharing your time with us today and for these really great and helpful tips and all this advice. This was really, really helpful. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Good. It was my pleasure.